Okay.
Is that good?
Yep.
Okay.
Let's do it.
Aaron, how are you? Good to see you, man.
Good. How about yourself, George?
All right,
Yeah. Virtually as always these days.
Yeah, that's it. That's the way we do it. We're the new issue of the magazine is nearly done. I'm editing we have like the laid out copy now and everything's good, but dude, you might be getting me into some hot water with your rear spoiler column. Well, actually, hold on. Let's back up for a second. Most people may not know who you are, believe it or not. So why don't we say that first?
Hello, my name is Aaron Plante, and I'm the rear spoiler.
So for those who read the magazine,
do I get my
what? What's that?
I was gonna say, do I get my token now that I've admitted my guilt?
I think so.
Isn't that the first step?
I don't know my jokes. I've not been through one of the programs. I don't know if that means that I need one or if that I'm free and clear of them. But
you probably need one.
Probably so. So for those who don't know, Aaron does the column in the back of the magazine called Rear Spoiler because back of the book, and a little bit more sassy, would you say, than the rest of the book typically?
The term sassy comes to mind.
Yeah.
It's a good
cynical
SNL classic.
And so this issue is big news in the book is e-tron. Well, big news everywhere for Audi is e-tron GT. And that's kind of the subject of your focus.
Yeah, I mean, we know the e-tron has had quite a busy past in terms of what e-tron meant, and will mean into the future. So, I am first and foremost an audiophile, a big Audi enthusiast to the core, but that doesn't mean we can't, be a little critical and turn that lens back onto our favorite brand with the four rings every once in a while. And I think the recent use of the nomenclature in e-tron has some confusing elements to it, and I thought we'd dive into that a bit and take a look at as we wrapped up the book.
I gotta say, I can't say entirely disagree with you, but always have to be careful since we're a brand focused book, and being critical, you're always going to get some people who critique your critique, if you will.
It's all in love. In love. I would gladly take any of the e-tron badged vehicles at any time, should they magically appear in my driveway to help curb my opinion otherwise.
Well, we have one. It's my wife's. You can't have it. So you can take it pry it out of her cold dead hands because she loves it. But shall we, instead of keeping people in suspense, do you want to summarize your piece, or shall I?
Interesting to hear how you would summarize it, but I would summarize it saying that the e-tron label should clarify what it aims to be in terms of the brand. Instead of using it partially for vehicles, partially for concepts, and partially as a mobility track, right? Electric power, and really figure what that is, and then use that as the brand to stop confusing customers. And I may add, having watched a ton of e-tron GT videos from automotive journalists, they're quite confused too. Some of them don't even know that they're not pronouncing the car's name correctly, which to me would be a brand issue. If I were Audi, I would think that was something we'd want to correct and make sure it was easy to understand.
So let's back up a second. The part of this came from a conversation of what's going on in the auto industry. Model names are kind of a mess to begin with, and this is across the industry. So the old days of go to our friends at BMW, brand B, the 330i is no longer. In the old days, it was an unwritten code, right? If you said 330 to a nerd, and a nerd would know it's a 3 Series 3 liter.
3 liter.
Right. Maybe it's an XI. IX, whatever, and that meant all-wheel drive and injection. But today a
Convertible,
330, yeah,
C,
today,
yeah,
today's a 320, or sorry, a 330. It is a 320 actually. It's a 2-liter 4-cylinder turbo.
right.
So like the engineers lost that battle, right? So the marketing people were like, "Yay, we won." People will perceive value, but at what cost, right? So and then the other side of this is the electrics are even more messed up, if you will. Like you start with Tesla, and you have this Model S, I guess, for sedan, and X for crossover. I'm guessing 3 for
And
I
3
don't know,
smaller.
no clue. Model 3, don't know what that means, and then truck, just or pickup.
Right.
I don't even know what they're calling that thing, but
Doom wedge of the future.
not quite bulletproof.
Right.
but and then you get to like the Ford and their Mustang Mach-E.
The not Mustang.
Yeah, I think it would have been cooler if it were just Mach-E. Drop the horse.
Yeah.
Totally just Mustang or Mach-E. Leave the Mustang for the Mustang. I don't know. And then a little closer to home, Porsche, the Taycan Turbo, which doesn't have a turbo.
Nope.
So
go
what
faster.
do we? Yeah. So shall we go to what e-tron means? Should we?
Let's go back into the archives and do a little bit of e-tron research here. I think it's worth it. So
Do you know? I mean, I'm talking about what the other meaning for e-tron. Are you aware?
Yes, en français.
Yeah, I think it might be Quebecois. I think it might just be a Canadian thing, is what I've heard.
Okay.
But if you Google translate e-tron minus the dash, you can figure it out.
Yeah, you could go Google it right now and then click the button over here. That's what they do on these shows. There's no button because we're not that sophisticated yet. We could barely even get our screens on. We're not even sure if this is recording. But
audio.
We'll get there. This is just the start.
Podcast before podcast, I guess.
Yes.
So you were going to go through the e-tron history?
Yeah, I think it's worth it. A quick tour. Actually, there is something now in that corner.
Whoa.
Yeah. So the history of e-tron starts humbly with the 2009 e-tron concept. This is dubbed the Frankfurt version because it premiered at the Frankfurt Auto Show. But quickly, right behind the heels was actually the 2010 e-tron concept at the Detroit Auto Show. Interesting thing about these two cars is different powertrains. I think this one was a hybrid. I think it had a diesel and electric engines, and this one was just full electric. So they're actually pretty different cars, right?
Yeah. So the red one you're looking at is based on the R8. They took an R8 chassis and they built it
smaller. Yeah.
And if I remember correctly, because nobody ever really confirmed this officially, but if I remember correctly, the proportions are different on that one. And the reason for it is because it was more the small MQB, or they were experimenting with like even though it almost looks like an Aston Martin kind of front heavy.
Yeah.
It was actually as I recall, the MQB mid, or like they were working on like a mid-engine. Volkswagen had like a Roadster. There would be probably later in your list, another one that's also on that MQB mid.
The Spider.
Yeah. So.
Yeah.
That one. Yes.
So Paris, the Spider. Yeah. So this is similar to the Detroit one, is what you're saying?
Yeah, just from what underpins them, they started with some of the component sets, but a lot of those component sets are from like when they were experimenting with doing a mid-engine transverse. Were it to have an engine, these of course being electric. I think that one was full electric too, wasn't it?
Yes, I believe if Wikipedia is correct.
Right.
But between those two though was actually an A1 e-tron concept. This is in 2010 at Geneva. I mean, looks like an A1.
I drove that
other
one.
Than you did this.
I did.
So
what was cool about it was it's a plug-in hybrid. And the range extender is a rotary, like the old NSUs, or like Mustang, right?
Yep. Rotary engine.
Not back to NSU. But what's great about a rotary is it's so silent and there's no vibration that you really couldn't feel when the range extender came on to charge the battery. And it could just, because it wasn't hooked up to the drivetrain, it wasn't a matter of torque or anything. It was just a matter of generating electricity with.
Yeah. Neat.
Yeah.
So yeah, in between they stuck this, and to Audi's credit, they along the way doing the hydrogen experimentation and all the other kind of fuel sourcing. So they've got all kinds of I think, weren't they called H-trons or G-trons, or there was other trons at the time?
There are natural gas and hydrogen power. I think they actually sold the G-trons. I don't know if they ever sold the H-tron. But
yeah, I think they did in Europe, right? Because they had some infrastructure that they put up there. So yeah, we talked about the other concept. Then we move into the 2011 A3 e-tron all electric. That's on the left, and the 2013 A3 e-tron plug-in hybrid. I got to drive that in LA. I happened to be in town, and they were doing that promo where they're just putting people in cars to give them some experience. So that was pretty neat. At the time, I hadn't even known that there was an all-electric version of that earlier, and I don't know much. I mean, you can see the body styles were a little different. So I think there was a front facelift or something in between those few years there.
So the what is it, 8L? The white one is the earlier A3, right? Like would have been the Mark V.
Yeah.
If you're talking Volkswagen generations.
Yeah.
The same as the TT Mark II or ish, right? That chassis. And then the red one was the HA, I think, but the MQB A3, and that was production. So the one on the left, the white one, was not produced. It was just a design study, if you will, or development study. And the red one, that might be the concept version that was shown first in your photo, but that they actually produced those and sold them here in the US. And I think range, if you went pure electric, was only about 15 miles. It wasn't great, but it was still, you could run pure electric and charge it. That was kind of cool too, because you would plug it in behind the rings, right? The rings moved to the side. And...
Yeah. Yep. Yeah, that was pretty cool. And you had the charger pack in the back, which fit underneath, I think, the bed. I mean, it felt like an A3, in terms of performance. It didn't feel like a dog or anything. And you really, it would tell you what mode it was in, but from a driving experience, where you couldn't, I thought it couldn't really tell. I thought they had done quite a good job there. So that was the first, what I think of as the first models that you could actually touch as a consumer, right? The other ones have all been kind of bespoke or demos. This is kind of the first one you could really actually use from a consumer market in North America, at least.
Sure.
Then next up is the R8 e-tron. So I had to throw in a Marvel reference here. So that's Stark's e-tron from Iron Man 3. He had two of them because his all got wrecked in the explosion. But anyway, they used at least two of those cars in production, probably several versions of it. And basically, I mean, this was a properly badged R8 with e-tron powertrain.
They had running prototypes of those that you'd see like executives driving around Ingolstadt and stuff, but they never actually sold those. The Mark II.
And they didn't. I guess they never made it here. Did they make it here?
Any of those prototypes? Not that I'm aware of. If it's like the first gen R8, they never produced it for the public, so nothing but internal mules would have been. Like, you used to see them parked at like the Audi Forum Ingolstadt. I know some of the board members and stuff would drive them, but they never actually sold them to the public. And then I assume probably later in your list, you've got the Mark II R8. Perhaps, maybe.
I might not actually.
It's blue.
Let's go find out.
And I think they produced.
No.
I got you. Did I stump you?
What year was that? You got me.
Whoa. They showed it when they showed the Mark II R8 for the first time. They showed a internal combustion engine R8, like the early Mark II. they showed an e-tron and they showed the LMS GT3 all at the same auto show. And this is probably like 2016, maybe. And they built only in Europe. They didn't import them. It was electric only. It didn't have very big range. And it's blue with like some kind of funky looking carbon fibers looking wheels.
Yep, I got it.
And depending on who you ask, I don't think they were supposed to make more than a couple hundred of them, but I've heard a rumor internally that they may have been produced in like the single digit quantities. So I don't know if the rumor's true, but
fewer than 100 units, it says.
Yeah.
End of production run.
Might have been fewer than 10 units. According to the guy who talked to me, he might have just been talking smack. Who knows? He didn't work for BMW. I know that.
All right, possibly. Or they added a zero. But that kind of concludes the prototypey stuff, and then we get into what we think of now. Right now, we're thinking with e-tron, and we've got our 2018 e-tron. I put SUV in parentheses because it was never referred as the SUV until the Sportback came along, I presume, so they could differentiate themselves. And then, of course, we not only have an e-tron, but an e-tron S SUV. So that's and S is, I think it's fair to say, would you S is equivalent to what we think of an S here with the combustion engines in terms of what the performance increase as it compares to an NA or Q, and between the RS and the A/Q.
I would say
safe to say.
I would say yes. It's probably a little more like because of the modular nature of the e-tron fenders, it actually has little flares, not the full-on molded like craziness that RS cars have, right? Like the full-on dedicated panels, but like it's still a cool look, and it's got the third motor in the back, which means they actually beat. For a while, they beat Tesla with Plaid to market. So being able to overdrive that outer wheel to sort of induce oversteer and drift a little bit. It's not exactly, I think from a performance standpoint, it's not exactly like the craziest, like it won't beat a straight line Model X, like whatever the highest, craziest Model X is. So that would probably be, were there ever to be an RS e-tron, that would probably be, there's room to go above it, I guess, unique panels, crazier motor or whatever. But like, so yeah, I think that's a fitting S. It's still e-tron S.
It's a performance boost, right? There's a little bit of body kit difference. It's the smaller picture here, so it's probably hard to see, but they are, you can tell them apart, put it that way.
Yeah, definitely. I would say, not to spoil where this conversation I think may lead, but is it weird that the S is a suffix? Or like...
Well, here at Rear Spoiler, that's exactly what we do, is we spoil things. So, so...
Which is like everywhere else. SQ5, S5, S4, it's a prefix, not a suffix.
Yes, here it's a suffix. It's an e-tron S, and so we'll move along here to, and again, sandwiched in between is the China only 2019 Q2L e-tron. I don't know much about this car other than they felt they needed to do it for the Chinese market in particular.
Is it pure electric or is it hybrid? Do we know?
I can tell you in a second here. It is all electric, long wheelbase variant of the compact Q2. I
wonder if it's not like, because Q2 is MQB, so like this is similar to like what's A3 or Q3 that we have today. The only full electric drivetrain I know that runs on that platform is e-Golf. Like, because like when you're at that level, right, they do a lot of drivetrain sharing. So like the A3 e-tron is like basically like the Golf GTE in Europe. So like the electric hybrid GTI, that's what we got in it's the 1.4 liter with the TFSI with a hybrid. If this is full electric, I wonder if it's like that e-Golf drivetrain, which isn't terribly fast, nor big range in the Golf. So like in this thing, which is probably heavier and of course seats more people,
Yeah.
probably even heavier and less range. But
It says 38 kilowatt lithium ion from a Chinese supplier,
okay,
165 mile range and top speed of 150 kilometers per hour. So
165 is pretty good. I think the e-Golf's only
Yeah.
like 120. So like, I don't know my power ratings on the e-Golf, so I couldn't compare that.
So anyway, there it is, sandwiched between. They do this kind of weird off, and then I had to throw in the RSQ e-tron again, just keep the alphabet soup in mind. But this was a concept car used in a cartoon, but I guess it's not a cartoon because it's CGI, right? But anyway, it was made specifically for that movie, Spies in Disguise, starring Will Smith and Tom Holland. And it actually has some pretty cool scenes. There's a deleted scene with a much longer chase scene of this of this car using more gadgets. It's actually pretty neat. Yeah, you can find it on YouTube if you search deleted scenes RSQ. But it's a really cool concept. I don't know, is there rumors of using pieces of this becoming something else?
I don't think so.
In the future?
I think they made a big deal when it came out of it being like the first, for the first car company to create a car for a CGI movie. So like it wasn't like the Pixar animators who designed the car, but it was I don't think it's a Pixar movie, was it? I think it was DreamWorks maybe. Whomever made it. Like it wasn't like the artist from that production company designing the car. It was Audi designers giving them the design then to use. So it's kind of a real car, not a real car.
Right. Yeah. I mean? It's like our life. It's a completely 100% virtual vehicle.
Right. Made for Zoom.
Yeah. It doesn't live in the flesh or in the sheet metal at all. But it was a cool idea. And it's also, I think, although I haven't seen any confirmation, a throwback to the RS or the, what was it? The iRobot Audi.
Oh, that was just the RSQ minus the e-tron.
RSQ, right? Just the RSQ. So Will Smith started that also, kind of a similar personality and role. So it felt like it was, a throwback to that as well. So it exists in the Cyberverse. This one is real, and it's our 2020 e-tron Sportback, and of course the e-tron S Sportback. So when you say e-tron, you can start to see how this is coming together, where I'm heading here. So if I say I own an e-tron, what do I own? I mean, at first you would think it's the e-tron that your wife owns, because I didn't say SUV. I didn't have to say SUV, but now I guess you'd have to say SUV. Otherwise, do we assume it's e-tron Sportback or e-tron SUV?
So historically, here's the thing that I think they tried to model after, but I'm not sure, is that like in the 1980s or late 70s, Audi's kind of hatching this idea for the quattro, right?
Yeah.
So it's going to be this thing that launches all-wheel drive, is like this sort of underlying theme to the brand if successful. And so they launch it as the quattro, and then within just a few model years, quattro is as a drivetrain and then as a name is underpinning everything, right? So you've got 5,000 quattro if you're in the United States. In Europe, it's 80, not 100, 90, whatever. And then like quattro just becomes this ubiquitous everywhere name because of the nature of the technology kind of permeating into everything.
Right.
And it's almost like somebody was like, let me back up for a second. I love the quattro, but from a naming standpoint, you need that meaning original in German, which is the history there, right? Like you need that there to specify what it is, because if you just say quattro, you don't even know. And so somebody looked at that model, which I thought was, this comes from an infant, like a brand, even though Audi was nearly probably 80 years old by the time that launches as a brand, it was still just kind of relaunching itself in its post-war era. So it really was in its infancy as a brand in that regard, from a marketing and formulaic, brand lexicon standpoint, right?
Yep.
And so quattro being called just quattro, and in the early days, it was even confusing as to like, is it capitalized? The British say it is. Everybody else says it's not, or at least the Germans. And then it's just it's absolutely from a formulaic like OCD standpoint, it's a bit of a train wreck because you don't know what it is unless it is the original kind of, when you think quattro, it's the proto, the be all end all, where it all started. So maybe they were thinking that, but it's like some marketing person went and was like, we're going to get this e-tron thing going. Let's start with that and just do the same thing, like all over again. Take none of the lessons we learned with quattro and just call it the e-tron.
Yeah. So, and I agree. I think it feels like it was an unintended consequence, right? Quattro brand permeating into a powertrain from the name of the car. And it feels, it's nostalgia always brings positive attitude, right? You don't nostalgically remember horrible things. So I think, it's everyone, or the Audi fans are going to see quattro as probably the first thing they think, if you're a fan, is the quattro. But if you put yourself back into the 80s and the chaos that it had to have caused in terms of branding and recognition, especially when, like you said, the brand was coming out of the Volkswagen ownership and finally kind of getting its wheels in the dirt, pun intended, and started to get moving. You could see how that would cause confusion for someone going to get their grocery getter, and they want to get an Avant, and they're getting it with quattro, and they drive it home, and the husband's like, dude, I thought we were getting a quattro, and what's now I got a long roof, which is cool, but not quite the same thing as a quattro. So
this Boxfire rally homologated, actually right there, the FIA homologation form for their quattro, but like you have this like homologated crazy car like that was Porsche 911 money when it was new, and then you have Ferris Bueller's dad who's like, yeah, I have an quattro, or I have a quattro too, right? Quattro, like, no, you don't. I mean,
right. I mean, he did have actually, mom did, right? An Audi 5000 S turbo.
It was dad. Mom had a K car. Mom had a K car wagon with wood siding.
But the license plate said M Mom, Mr. Right? M Mom was the license plate.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. So it feels like, and again, I haven't asked anybody, but it feels like one of two possibilities. One, it feels like too, if you listen or look at the interviews, that they're kind of walking back from it a bit, but that, we intentionally wanted to brand e-tron in the spirit of quattro, but kind of not recalling the issues that caused from a marketing and branding standpoint. But, there's certainly a cool factor there. Or they really just kind of went into this saying the e-tron is going to be the car, and then we came up with a bunch of other e-tron models and kind of got stuck in their own trap.
Yeah,
I feel like it's the former. I feel like they were trying to grab the spirit of quattro because electric is the next biggest thing, just like all-wheel drive was the last big thing. But it feels like it was an ill-conceived plan because of the confusion that it causes, customers and the automotive journalists as a whole.
It seems like if you look at the branding, right, they took that kind of very unique 80s sort of font, right, like the quattro script, right, like the lowercase, and they made almost from the very beginning, and I think maybe from the very beginning, they made the e-tron logo in that same sort of foundational font, right? That's so when you talk about foundational tech, it's rare that they use it, but they used it there. And so that's all cool. And I think it makes sense. But like the other problem here is that, like, on one hand, early on, they're not being like, it's on a hybrid. Now it seems to be electric only. Like the hybrids are
right.
TFSI-E, not e-tron. Even though the A3 that was sold here as an A3 e-tron would probably be in today's brand speak
a hybrid.
A3 TFSI, and then whatever, and that's the other side. Like they're giving these we'll get to that in a minute, but they're giving these arbitrary power numbers. That's kind of like I bagged on BMW earlier on by calling the 330 or their 2-liter a 330. But like, in fairness, Audi's going to this arbitrary number thing too. That like
A855 versus the A850.
My wife's e-tron is a 55. I mean, it's not in the US, but in Germany, it's an e-tron 55. So it's I guess supposed to rate up along a certain power level with
power
ICE.
band.
Yeah. But it's hard to follow. Well, but
they don't explain it, and it doesn't map to an engine, right? It doesn't map to a liter or no. Kilowatt or whatever. It doesn't map to anything. It's just arbitrary start and stop numbering system.
Let's come back to that for a minute. We'll get to the arbitrary number thing in a minute, but let's go back to the original e-tron, because I think there's probably something worth covering here. Is that like the quattro was the quattro. There was no like quattro concept ahead of time. There was no, kind of quattro. Well, I guess there was like with the TKW Munga or whatever, but like there wasn't like any, there wasn't any kind of soft lead up to, right? So the question is, if there's an e-tron, what's the e-tron? Is it what my wife drives? Which is, let's face it, I love it. It's a great vehicle, but it's a mid-size crossover. So it's not exactly sex on wheels, right? It's a very sexy mid-size crossover, but it's not like an R8. So then you have, is the R8 Mark II that they actually sold the e-tron here in the US is the A3 hybrid,
right?
The e-tron, or is it that red concept car from 2009? That's the e-tron.
Right.
And if that's the e-tron,
this is the challenge.
Yeah, and if that's the e-tron, why can't my e-tron, my wife's car, be called like something? The e-tron Avant. I mean, if one's the Sportback, like the A7, then is the other one the Avant, like the long roof? Because it is a long roof, but you probably have, as much as you and I are sitting here complaining, you probably have every Avant nerd out there, if they called that thing an Avant, probably head on fire.
Yeah, they'd
wanting to get in on this call.
and they probably should, because it is a crossover, right? Which is another kind of a weird category of car just in general. That's across the market space though. So that's one of the problems with what I think happened, or my theory on it is, if they intended to recreate the kind of the greatness and platform moving of what Quattro did for the brand, they shouldn't have had 5 years of e-tron stuff they were dabbling in concept and low production volumes ahead of time, because then you can't have that e-tron.
I would have liked somebody,
like, people are going to want it.
Exactly. When the marketing person came ahead, like when they're about to launch this SUV that I own, which is a great SUV, but they're about to launch it and somebody goes, let's call it the e-tron, like we did with the Quattro, just Quattro. I would have liked somebody in the room to be like, hey, that would have been a cool idea in 2009, but we've already had so many versions of it at this point. It's just going to be really confusing. And also, it's not a homologation special. Like it's a really great crossover. I just had it at Pottery Barn and brought home a ton of like boxed up patio furniture in the back of that thing. It's amazing what it'll carry. It's a great vehicle. It's not an Quattro. So, yeah.
Well, and then we haven't even gone into motorsports, where since 2013 they threw e-tron and Quattro on the LMP1 R18. So,
which I thought was brilliant, because
that was in the middle of all this.
Yeah, and it was probably a stretch to call it, because maybe later it became a battery, but early on it was like a flybrid, right? So you have this vacuum, this flywheel in a vacuum that spins. So when you brake, Tom Christensen brakes, the energy gets recaptured and spins that flywheel. And when he goes out the next corner and hits the next straight and hits the gas, it releases the kinetic energy and goes. There's not really much electric going on there. So F-tron? I don't know. But eventually, towards the end, I think 2016, 2015, maybe, they were running batteries. So
it did get there officially.
Yeah.
But all right, so we're almost through here. So we've got the Sportback now. Again, S version of it. I like the shape of this car. I mean, just to I'm dogging on the names, but I mean, in terms of the vehicles, it's really, I think it's a nice, it is a nice stylistic thing to include in an e market right now, electronic market, where Audi's just kind of getting in, and maybe not everybody wants to start with an SUV straight up, and so I think this is a nice kind of working its way into that performance segment from that, sexing it up, for lack of a better term, like you said.
It's kind of where the market is, and I'll tell you, like that, the only difference between that and the I'm going to call it the long roof, right? The crossover, the one that I have. The only difference is that back, right? It's like an RS7 versus an RS6, right? Like the back is more long roofed, if you will. But like it's we run 22s on ours in the summer, so more similar to like that sort of presence. We get more comments on the car, like just park places, or my wife will she said she was just at the orthodontist the other day, and like the guy checking the kids in because COVID, she has to wait outside, the kids go in, and the guy checking the kids in was like, yeah, checked in my daughter, and then was like just picking her brain about the car, like, tell me more about it, it's awesome, I know the Q5, I know the Q7, what is this is hot. So like it's a great car, but it's where the market is, crossovers.
Yep. And then we go to my personal favorite for both reasons. I mean, this car, I love this car. I mean, it's a beautiful car. It's getting great reviews. It is similar to the Taycan in terms of performance, but I actually prefer this look over the Taycan. And otherwise, it's a lot of good bits are the same. And but man, do we really hit this nomenclature issue with a hammer here? If you were building some sort of theory as to how they were using the convention, this will really take you for a spin. So the e-tron GT is e-tron with the GT Grand Touring, right? So it's an old school reference to a touring car. By the way, I hate when BMW started adding GT when they had that sloped back, sport back, and they started calling things GT too. I mean, GT 5, whatever, that 5 number. It was.
It seemed like BMW trying too hard. So GT, we're saying Gran Turismo, Grand Touring has been a sort of idiom of cars for, nearly as long as cars have been around, and more recently. In modern car history, you think of like the great GT cars, and it's like the Aston Martins and the front engine Ferrari 250s, and like the Jaguar E-Type, and then later as you get more into the rad era, the quattro is very much more of a Grand Touring versus like an R8, which is less. It's more of like an exotic, right? Like it's the mid engine,
right?
But like typically like this sort of proportion of a front engine. You look at how long that blue car is behind you over your shoulder. And particularly ahead of the A pillar, it's that was very much their point of trying to make this a GT. So
and it accomplishes that, right? I think it's really nice, really great lines. It's got some meat on the haunches there. It just looks aggressive, but it's not overdone. So they called it the e-tron GT. I get that. I mean, I can get behind that, given e-tron being, I mean, if it's a mobility train moniker or whatever. But the RS version is called the RS e-tron GT, and very important to keep in mind where the RS is. And in fact, if you look at the back of the car, it puts RS on the left-hand side, license plate, e-tron GT. So to me, they're trying to tell you very clearly that the RS goes in front of the e-tron GT, but the other S or performance models of the e-tron have the S after the e-tron, as you mentioned earlier. So it becomes what would have called the prefix suffix issue, where essentially, if the e-tron badge is intended to become a mobility train, what's the proper way to say it?
I think it's like it's a type.
It's more of a mobility
type of mobility, right?
Right.
As it seems they're using it now,
combustion or electric.
Right. If it's full electric, not hybridized in any way, then it's an e-tron.
Right.
So
Yeah.
but you
So
you could have
if that's what we're going for,
coming out is later this year, Q4 e-tron, right? So now you've got a
right. Right.
Q4 sized e-tron suffix.
Yes. And they've very intentionally marketing that, hey, after these guys, these three, the Q4 e-tron, this is how we're going to call everything. It'll be
Oh, are they?
they're going to try to stick to even numbers. Yeah, they'll try to stick to even numbers being e-tron and odd numbers being not e-tron, at least in the Q line. I don't think that works as well in the A line, but anyway, we'll see how that goes. But that's the intent. So they want to start with the Q, and start using these badges starting next year, right? So if that's the case, then what we have here, I'm sorry to say, my four-ringed friends, is prefix, suffix, suffix, or maybe it's suffix, prefix. And you see the problem. There's no noun. There's
I think it's safe to
no
say
noun.
that RS when it leads is an Audi, like RS Q3. No, because TTRS, it's a suffix. You're right. RS3. Yeah. So in TTRS speak, it's a suffix, but I think that's the only instance of suffix. Otherwise, it's this prefix.
Right. In Audi world, right? In Porsche, or they use the hell out of RS.
I mean, that's a whole other question, right? I remember you first threw your column idea at me, and that was kind of the conversation of like, what does it stand for? Like at Porsche, it's definitely Rennsport. And I remember once, right. I'm gonna name drop, but like saying RS meaning Rennsport to Tom Christensen, and he's like, is that what it means? And I was thinking like, Tom Christensen doesn't know. Maybe I made an assumption here, right? Because that guy should know. So like, right. Maybe he's just messing with me. I don't know. I'll have to ask Tom next time I talk to him. But like, maybe it means rally sport at who knows? Because Audi has that great rally history. Not right. The dumpy mid-level Camaro rally sports, but like real rally, which Audi actually has some credentials in. But like, yeah, I don't. And here's the other side of it. It's if you were going to make because there's an e-tron GT and an RS e-tron GT. What if you wanted to have an S? Because if there were like a mid-range one, right? Like if there were, because on the e-tron, it's the e-tron S. It's not the S e-tron. So
right. And another kind of associated minor gripe is if you look at the e-tron GT and the RS e-tron GT, there's not the same level of difference in terms of the exterior as a typical RS to S or even A or Q platform car, right? I mean, you've got, I think, you get some carbon fiber. You can get a carbon fiber roof. You get the front grille is a bit different, and you get the RS badge on the back. I'm hard to find. Well, it's the coloring, I think. I don't think it could color match. I don't think you color match an RS. I think it's got. It's the same.
Pull up the configuration.
Pattern,
I have no idea.
Right?
But if the bumper is this exact same, right? Like I think that's where.
Yeah.
I can tell you the little man behind the curtains. Like I can tell you why I think it's that way, right? The inside baseball answer. But what's interesting here is you have like the e-tron GT, which is no slouch, right? It's a legit, practically six-figure car, like borderline six-figure, literally borderline. And then you have the RS. The bumpers are the same, exactly. The fenders are the same, exactly. Wheel difference, badge difference. And so you could maybe beat up on it and say, well, it's just badges, but it's not. We all know like the power level. And I think even at Porsche with Taycan, you had a similar thing, right? Where like there's really no differentiation between a 4S and a turbo, where in a 911, there's definite differentiation between a 4S and a turbo. So like, the reason for that, I'm sure, is that this car is built by the organization formerly known as Quattro Gambeja, another ubiquitous quattro term, right? But like they changed its name to Audi Sport and Gambeja, and so they don't really do S cars, right? And like so this car is a little bit more like the R8, right? Where there's no SR8, there's no RSR8. You either have R8 kind of does what R8 wants to do, and I suspect that's what's happening here too, which is like Audi Sport don't play that, right? Like we're just gonna do what we want to do, and that's good. and it works because we are really good at doing what we do. But yeah, it's tough to from the challenge of that is you have the overall Audi lexicon, the brand formula that's like AS line, S, RS, and maybe RS plus, right? And that's you have these and like S line competitions and like these nuanced whatevers along the way in different places. But you have this amazing formula that works, and like this is just kind of like, we don't care about the formula. Well, whatever, we're just gonna do what we want to do. And the other side of this is GT. So there's the Coupe GT, which was like cool, but not that cool, right? Like it wasn't their quattro. And then there was the R8 GT, which was like the badass R8, like the first real badass R8.
Yeah.
Not that all R8s aren't badass to a degree, but like the one that was like, the big flex was the GT.
Next up.
So yeah. Did you notice Motor Trend? Since you wrote this column, Motor Trend got it. Like they drove the car and they called it the e-tron GTRS.
RS, yeah. So did a couple vloggers, that do car reviews. A bunch got it right too, but they weren't reading the rear deck lid to get the instruction manual on how to pronounce the car.
Did you see Doug DeMuro was like RS on this side?
Yeah,
he's like the detail guy, right? He got it. Yeah. It's way over here. So like e-tron GT is over here.
He also said he asked them about it because he was a bit confused, with what meant what kind of a thing. And so the answer was look at the instructions are on the deck lid, essentially, it was the answer to the question. I will say I was just at Cars and Coffee this morning, and one of my friends, a retired gentleman who's got a really wonderful, some would say awful, but I would say wonderful car habit, and he's got this huge collection of really cool stuff. And he just showed up this morning in like an AMG 63 E-Class wagon, and beautiful car, but like on the side badge alone, it was like AMG 63 4MATIC Plus, like all these. Like you got to hand it to Audi with that. They're not like they don't just put all these badges down the side to like cover, like everything.
The spec list on the quarter panel of the car.
Yeah, exactly. So I mean, again, I haven't had the pleasure, but from what I hear and see, the car itself is doing everything that Audi wants to in terms of entering an electric market in a performance, perspective. I think really the only thing going against it compared to almighty Tesla is range. And then alongside of that is the ability to charge it right in the real world outside of your house, and find those different places to do that compared to Tesla's network, which I think is a problem that will be solved in short order, right?
Very short order, I think.
Yeah.
I've had my e-tron for a year and a half and like 20,000 miles. You get like, here's a couple things. One, you get like 2,000 miles of free charging at Electrify America, which is fast charging. And so I've only just used that. Literally, I ran out of my credits last weekend on a road trip with my wife. So that means like 10% of the time is all on public charging. Everything else is charge at home, in which case you don't care about the speed because, it charges in like 6-7 hours. On the level 2 in my house. And so and my wife charges for free at work. So it's super cheap to operate in that regard. Even charging on Electrify America is like a fraction of paying for petrol. So so it's really affordable to run. And what I'm curious is more, so in the year and a half we've owned ours, there are a lot more Electrify Americas around, and there are other high capacity, either 50 kilowatt, which is like the old style of fast charge, like when some of the early electric cars were coming out, and then now 150 or 350 or 120, maybe it is. I can't remember. And 350 are the fast ones that Electrify America offers. And whenever we there are a lot more of them now. And most of the main routes, if you look at Electrify America's map, it's exploding. And given they're not the only one, and everybody but Tesla is standardized, like Tesla, the sheer number are you already got way more chargers for non-Teslas, but on top of that, the quick chargers, I think Tesla's lead will be gone here in another, probably, I don't know, I'm not an expert, but probably in another year or so. So I don't really know that's a thing. And these things charge fast. Like I don't know about these, but I know these are better ability to take a charge than the e-tron, and the e-tron will, just the way it does it is it charges at almost like full, like peak charging from like 20% to 80%, and then drops down to like 50 kilowatt from, or kind of trails off to 50 kilowatt till you get to 100, right? If you're charging to 100, where like the Teslas drop off after 50. It just sort of, and the other challenge you have to watch when you stop to charge is Tesla superchargers, they will split. So if you have two cars on the same supercharger, they'll split the charge between the two, where Electrify America doesn't do that. So
it's timing, again, just catching up to the market space. So so there's two we talked about both of them, but the Q4 being the first properly labeled e-tron according to Audi, coming up. I guess it's on its way already, really, because it probably depends where you are.
They just showed a prototype of that car, like how like early e-tron they put a livery on it and called it a prototype. It was a full production car. They just showed the full production version of that last week, in like with a livery on it, so you can't really see the lines. And I expect it'll probably be here in the market by like literally in the US before the end of the year, probably sometime in like Q3.
And then the Sportback will follow, which looks good. Again, I thought a Q4 in a Sportback, it looks really sharp. So looking forward to that. And then I threw at the end are my favorite, just because it didn't quite fit. And then the other thing I was looking up in terms of motorsport was they do technically call the Formula E's an e-tron, although they don't badge them anywhere in marketing on the vehicle, right, on the livery. I don't think I see e-tron, but they call it the e-tron. It is called an e-tron. Its internal designation at the least is e-tron.
It is on the livery, and it says no. Up until this year, they were running a spec motor, and I think spec batteries.
Oh, so yes, because this is their and this is the end of it too. This is their last.
Right. Yeah. So they developed their own motor, and I think they decided at that point they were going to.
They called it
pull the plug. But the what is it? Richard Branson's team, Virgin, will still run.
Virgin,
Virgin is going to run the car another year yet. So we'll get one more. We'll have this season with Audi yet, and then the following season, Virgin will still be running Audis. But it'll be interesting to see what they call the Le Mans car in 2023, because that's going to be a hybrid. So will they call it e-tron?
Yep. I mean, it feels like they should. One, why start making sense with its use now, and two, it is if anything, the motorsports branding of a concept for Audi that'd be the place to do it, right? If you want to get noticed and associate it with championships and success. I mean, that's how Quattro got pushed into the rest of the models through its success. So I mean, it makes sense from that perspective. So I'd be more surprised if we didn't see e-tron label on that car somewhere.
Yeah, it was interesting. I'm trying to think. I could be totally wrong on this. So sorry, folks, if you're listening and I got this wrong. But like the Pikes, or not Pikes Peak, the Dakar car that they teased a couple weeks ago, that they're going back to Dakar with this e-tron, but it's got like a 2-liter turbo. I forget what they called it. Like, it might have been range extender that they said, but it was like, it's not a hybrid. But like, right, like the reality is, if you're going to Dakar, you're a little bit far beyond range, right? So like, aren't going to be high capacity chargers in wherever Paris to Dakar is now. It's not, unfortunately, doesn't run to Dakar anymore. I think it's in Dubai is where they run it nowadays. But
they may have electric chargers there then.
Maybe so. And so they'll be able to jump. They'll be able to jump from building to building. And,
that's right.
Yeah.
On a full charge.
Yeah.
So hopefully that gives a little bit of insight. I'm not out of my mind. If you look at the history, the visual history, it's a bit tenuous sometimes to figure out what they were doing, what they are going to do, and what will your e-tron be referred to in 10 years? How will they refer to that car?
It just struck me, like, going back to what we were saying about how, like, Audi Sport Gambit didn't play that, right? Like they're not going to do an S version.
Yeah.
But there's part of like going back to the R8 model, right? Like there's no RS R8, there's no R8 RS, there's no right RS V10 R8. Like it's just R8 or R8, V10 competition or V10 plus GT, whatever. So could they have done that even where it was like e-tron GT? Like e-tron GT is the thing, and then it's this, e-tron GT Performance, e-tron GT Plus, or whatever that like kind of follows in the vein of the R8 as this sort of Audi Sport above all the formula, kind of, doing whatever because RS is sort of like when Audi Sport puts the magic touch on a more mundane Audi.
Yep.
Like everyman Audi, like an A6 Avant. Oh, you want to touch the A6 Avant? Here's the RS6, and like cue the angels, and it sounds amazing, and the car's badass. Yeah. But like the R8 GT needs no such angel touching, right? Like it is the R8 is the R8. So like I kind of think
it came out of the stable, right?
Yeah,
it came out like that.
Yeah, exactly. It just dropped out of heaven, like this. This is all coming. By the way, this is all probably me being skewed because I was like first on the list at my dealer for e-tron GT. Like when the concept first showed, I was like, is there anybody on your list? No, put me on it. And then it drops, and my dealer's like, yeah, you wanted the e-tron GT, not the RS e-tron GT. We already have a line for that one now too. Right? Like, so like it's right. What? Like if I said first R8, I meant first R8. I didn't mean, So anyway, I just don't get why they had. I don't really get the naming on this. I mean, I love the car. I want one. I lust after it, but I don't get the naming on it.
Yeah, I mean, like, what you call it's one thing, but that's why the title of the article is what's in a name, play on Shakespeare's play of the same name. But at the end of the day, you get the car's in your driveway or your garage and you get it. I mean, doesn't matter what it's called. It's still everything it is and all the greatness of Audi. But, you go to a party and you say, I got an e-tron. I'll tell you one thing. If I had an RS e-tron GT, I'd be making sure I used all the alphabet soup. I'd be using all my prefixes and suffixes because I wouldn't want to be confused. No offense with the e-tron,
I think that's what I'm going to do. I'm the first day that they deliver an RS e-tron GT to the guy who got in line in front of me. I'm going to pull up and be like, oh, you have an e-tron. I do too.
Right.
And I'll be driving my wife's crossover.
That's right.
We're the same. And he'll be like, hey, buddy, we're not the same.
Right. Yeah. So there you have it. That's the crux of my complaint, properly shoved at the back of the book. So in case people get tired reading, they won't even get to it, which I'm hoping all of the Audi brass get too tired to read to the end.
It is my hope that, like, what I love about this brand, I would hope at times it not be taken too seriously, right? This is meant from a place of love. And if you can't have fun with the people you love, then who can you have fun with? So
that's right. Nobody.
Yeah.
And again, nothing to do with it's just badging, right? And badges have caused chaos throughout the automotive industry.
Right.
So it's just another chapter in that book. Which would probably be a good one. Disastrous auto brand nomenclatures.
Yeah. Hey, it's no Mustang.
Yeah. I mean, they didn't do the Mach-E thing, so that's our Mustang Mach-E thing.
Even Mach-E, there again, like you go into your marketeers versus your engineers, right? And truth in engineering, Vorsprung durch Technik, whatever. Like Audi is an engineering brand. When especially I come to expect it from Ford, right? Where, you have the Mark 1 through 8 at Lincoln's, and then you get the MKX, right? Which we don't even know what Mark is anymore. So we're just going to make it our alphanumeric. And then you have the Mach-E, which Mach is a speed, but E is a
electric.
It's not even Roman numeral, right? Like you can't even say that. So like, it's just, E for electric and speed. So there you go. And
Mustang, because it's the heritage of speed there.
Well, I get it's kind of, it's the nomenclature equivalent to what my e-tron crossover is, right? Like Audi looked at the market and said, we're going to launch one electric car. What can we launch? And they didn't
Yep.
hear me going, make it an A5 Sportback and I'll buy one for myself, right? Like it was,
right.
It was the crossover. And so we got one for my wife because that's what she drives and it's been a great family car. But like the crossover was the smart play because it'll sell every one they can build.
Yeah.
Right.
Yep.
And my guess is from a nomenclature standpoint, they were like, why don't we put them, you know, if it was such an earth shaker when Tesla launched with the Roadster because it was sexy versus like some, you know, just the sedan, like maybe we should launch Mustang is our sexiest brand name, most successful, most heritage. Let's throw that on it and hope nobody calls it like a Mustang 2 or whatever. Wasn't that the one the Charlie's Angels drove? Like the weird looking one? The Mustang?
Yeah.
The failure, the like late 70s. It's probably ironic cool now.
Yeah.
But,
Yes.
So they didn't do that.
Yeah. Underpowered on top of everything.
Yeah. Well, the 70s. So,
yeah.
Right? Well, it wasn't underpowered in the 70s.
That's true. Yeah. I don't know. I give Ford a lot harder time though, because, you know, Tesla was coming into, they were inventing the market in a way, right? I mean, at least for the consumer side of it. So, you know, they use the Roadster because that's going to appeal to the people could afford it in the first place, right? It was going to be that group, and it'd be fun to run around in a full electric, super, you know, Miata sized creation. So that all made sense to me. But you know, you can't leverage the Mustang brand and then shove it into a car. I don't know. I take personal umbrage against that. You know,
let's look at it a different way, right? Like the question is, I think Ford went kind of safe, right? Like actually, I just saw my first Mach-E at literally last weekend on that road trip at an Electrify America station. I ran into two Ford engineers testing a mule of, I guess their production now, they're dealers, but like they were still doing some, I don't know, charging testing or something. But it's very much that sort of e-tron Sportback, you know, roof line. And I'm standing there like comparing, like with one engineer where we're kind of hanging out by the Chargers chatting, and you know, he was curious about the e-tron, and he's like, what's your range? What do you know? It turns out we're pretty much nearly the same spec, right? Like they're basically very similar from a performance standpoint. And I don't know. It's a sexy, you know, it's like the e-tron Sportback basically by Ford and probably different materially and whatever. But I guess you look at it and go, Volkswagen, I guess is a better comparison. They just came like literally at dealers now. They just started delivering ID4s, which is very similar to the Q4 e-tron, or at least I think the Q4 e-tron will be more close to when the all-wheel drive ID4 comes out. I think the lower powered rear-wheel drive ID4 is what's hitting the market now, and I don't think Audi's coming out for that.
Yes,
but but would Volkswagen have been better off? Like I'm sure somewhere they were like picking their, you know, one ID4 is another thing. Like, what the hell are they doing with the naming, the ID thing? I mean, keep beating up on naming, but like, anyway, where I'm going with that is they probably chose, okay, we have this MEB architecture. We're going to launch the first electric product for Volkswagen, not counting e-Golf. What are we going to call it? Right. And like somewhere, I mean, they launched the ID3 in Germany, but like, because the Golf's going to be what sells over there. Over here, they were like, let's do the crossover itself. But would they have been better off launching the microbus? Because iconic, highly sought after, creates a buzz, like literally, which is why they call it, I think, the ID Buzz. But like, it's going to get all the headlines when that thing finally arrives. And like, you know, I think initial responses to ID4 is like, oh, it's a crossover, right? Like they're going to sell a million of them. It's all predestined, right? Like no question about that. But like, you know, would they have made more of a statement, or would Ford have made more of a statement doing maybe like a 4-door low slung fastback Mustang, right? Than like this thing.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Small volume. Like like the in the vein of Tesla. Yeah, I mean, obviously, like you said, they went after what they're going to sell the most on, but then they tried to scoop up all the other history of the brand, and then just throw it on the badges. And that's you should be careful with your badges. Badges mean something. They mean something to us. And
Yeah.
we like to run around and tell everybody what we have, what we're driving,
Well,
and trim
let's be
levels and
honest.
everything.
Ford,
And you're making
other
it
than
hard.
other than Mustang, so that's probably the family jewels right there. Ford hasn't been okay. Maybe the pickup trucks too. Ford has never been one to really stick with name badges, right? They'll dust
Right.
some off once in a while,
Right.
but there's by no means. I think that's where, like, when it comes to the Germans, and so why I beat up on BMW early on, or why we're having some fun with Audi here with the GT, is that, like, they have such like just this. It's a brand speak. It's a I can
Yep.
say A4 2.8 or even less, probably more coded with like the 330, right? And like most, you say 330 to most any German car enthusiast, and they're gonna be like, oh, E30, E46,
Right.
no, E20, what, or E21, I guess it was, right? So like, but like it's a language we as car nerds speak, and like,
Yes.
so that's something where, like, it's nice to have that inside baseball language. And I get the feeling like marketers like there's no lexicon they're really too concerned about. They're just
Right.
kind of like, whatever.
Yeah.
What makes a good story? And like, but it just seems so wrong, and kind of like, when you see a 330 is a 2.0 liter, whatever, you're
Right.
kind of like, what the hell, guys? Like it's the nerds who help sell a lot of other cars, and
Right.
act as ambassadors for these brands are kind of put off. So
Yeah, I mean, it didn't matter what fan you were, BMW, Audi, Mercedes, but how many other makes and models can you run around saying it's a B7 A4 or an E90 M3,
or a W124, and I'm not even a Mercedes guy, right? But I think that's an E-Class.
Exactly, right? But we all know each other's, because it's a recipe and it's easy. It's like this plus this equals this.
Yeah.
And you go outside and, into the Japanese market, American market, and they just call them things or made up words. And, there's then they just throw S's and RS's all over the place. They don't mean anything consistent.
Right.
And so, yeah, I mean, to me, the mistake Audi made, or what they didn't capitalize on, is keeping that, and instead just kind of played around with a bunch of prefixes and suffixes that are cool and mean something, but together I'm lost as to what it is.
You kind of reminded me of one other thing I think we didn't cover, but I think we ought to, which is, so you have, the Germans have always been good at alphanumerics, right? And other people try to copy that, whether it was, Lexus launching themselves in the 90s, or like whether it was, in the 2000s, Lincoln going from names to MK, whatever letter they felt like throwing at it. But like the Germans were always very formulaic, with one exception of the Germans sold here in the US, and that was Volkswagen, right? So you have Golf, Scirocco, Corrado, whatever. But what was interesting even about Volkswagen, and what I always kind of respected about them, was they kind of went their own way than the prestigious Germans by kind of having these names, but they still stuck with that underlying Germanic quality of sticking with the engineering elements in a way that they sort of created these sub brands around their engine technology, right? So you had the 16 valve, or you had the G60, or you had the VR6, right? And these, so that you had these identities around the powertrains, which was interesting, that I don't think a lot of other brands ever really fully achieved, right? Like you have the displacement at the German luxury brands, but you don't really have this sort of like engine technology. I don't know. I could be wrong. There's probably examples of it elsewhere in the you can point, like, what was the Supra motor that everybody loves, but there was no branding for that on the Supra, right? Like there was no, it wasn't like the Corrado G60 or the Corrado VR6, and you knew the difference between that. And I guess where I'm going with that is more whether it's the branded name, like 16 valve G60 VR6, or whether it's the displacement formula that's been at, Audi. It's always been like the, A6 4.2, A6 2.7T, 3.0T, whatever. They kind of cheated a little bit when the supercharged one came out, right? Because it was a 3.0T and it wasn't turbo. But like, I guess that's what I'm waiting for people to do, rather than this 55 junk that we've seen, is to like come up with some sort of engineering derived term for for describing what's in that car. So whether it's like I don't know, however you would measure like the diameter of an electric motor, right? Like what's it called? Like like the thing that spins, the copper, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Or whether it's
Yeah,
the
yeah.
battery size. Like I heard an interesting idea on another podcast, but it was like Tony Carroga from Car and Driver was like, they should have called the Ford Electric, like the Galaxy, and then like name the range. So like the Galaxy 200, the Galaxy 300, the Galaxy 500. Like if they're able to get the range to that. Now that's probably problematic because like depending on cold or warm weather, you're gonna have the Galaxy instead of the Galaxy 200, you're gonna have like the Galaxy 160, right? And like everybody's gonna be false advertising, and it's all gonna go to hell. Thanks, Tony. But I guess what I'm wondering is like, there a way to like maybe even brand either like Volkswagen did with the VR6 and the G60 to sort of like come up with some sort of engineering derived designation for, the one motor or the two motor or the, like a way to say like maybe displacement wouldn't be the word for an electric motor, but there's got to be something to designate the size of the motor. Right. And or maybe like the battery size combined with the size of the motor. I don't know. I mean, it can't be that hard, right? Like it's something that's legitimately measurable versus like arbitrary 55.
Right.
It could be a 2-liter in this car. Literally the Q5 TFSI-E, I believe, is a 55. So like that's a 2-liter hybrid that's a 55. And then the e-tron, which is a 55. And then the 3-liter turbo all ice A6 might be a 55. I don't know. But like that arbitrary 55 is like 3 different technologies at least. And there's probably a TDI 55 in Europe, somewhere in Germany that like, don't give me a number. like give me a number that means something, that like stands for something. I kind of like the TFSI.
At least you can correlate it.
Yeah. Like TFSIE, I was like, all right, like I literally was like nerdy enough that when they launched that nomenclature on the hybrids, and I think it launched with like the Q5 and like this most recent round, right? A6 and in Europe,
right?
A7 before they started adding the 55, and I was like, if I had an A3 e-tron, I would be pulling those e-tron badges off it and putting like TFSIE on the back, and you know what I mean? but because I'm a nerd. But like it means something, and now e-tron no longer means hybrid, so that's why I would be pulling that off, right? Because I don't want to say I'm not the guy with the M badge on the the 320i. But like yeah,
exactly.
Yeah,
that's the other side of the badging, right? Badge abuse. When people that's a whole other topic. People rebadging their cars to pretend they're things that they're not.
I mean, how?
Yeah,
that's a pretty cheap mod for all you. That's what I'm going to do. I'm going to go up and buy my e-tron GT slot,
right?
Which isn't an RS. Then I'll go to the parts counter and get RS badges.
Just get that. Yeah, you only need one.
There's
outside.
one on the grill too. There's one on the flank, or one on the butt, and one on the grill.
So, I thought the grill was the same.
I think there's one on the grill.
Are we sure?
I don't know. It's also new. I
didn't see it.
If I make a stand that it is on the grill, then I will be wrong. And if I don't make a stand, then I will be right. So I'm not making a stand.
I'm sure they'll let us know.
Yeah. By the way, I have to say that Kimura gray car behind you in your background looks.
It's
very distracting. Eye grabbing.
I wish it was in my background.
Oh yeah, like legit, you're hanging out at your Spanish villa and about to spin off down to I don't know.
This can't be Austin, because all of our palm trees are dead from the ice event. Right.
Yeah. So how would has that been like much talk there of like how would when you see electricity go off, that was kind of like all the idiots on the news up here were like, no, if you lived in Austin, you had an electric car, you wouldn't be able to go anywhere. Like, yeah, if you didn't have a charge on it, I guess. But like, if you did have a charge on it, you can power your house. So,
Guess what? You couldn't go anywhere. There was nowhere to go.
Yeah.
everything was closed and there was a sheet of ice on the ground. We have no infrastructure. There's no sand trucks. There's no plows. There's nothing. You just sit and wait for it to melt because normally it's gone in 6 hours. So
Yeah.
it didn't matter. You didn't need to. You didn't need power to your car because you couldn't go anywhere anyway. So
One, arguably, if the power
kind of
does come
a
back on,
non-issue.
or if you had a charge on your car, or the power does come back on and you can further power your car, most electrics, you can pull the power off of it and power your, emergency heat or whatever else in your home off the car. So there's an advantage.
Run the
too,
car
right?
as a
Like,
generator.
yeah, or just
Yeah.
a battery, as a battery. I think it's less of a generator.
Yeah,
You're not running
storage.
something to generate. Yeah, but it's definitely storage.
Yeah. It's a giant USB drive or a
Right.
USB charger. It's like, yeah, that's a good point. I'm going to use that in my internal family marketing to work my way towards an e-tron something.
There you go, dude. I'll tell you what. So
To be determined.
It's another bad analogy, dad joke. So to plug e-trons real quickly, even if you are plugging e-trons, that could be our name of the e-tron podcast. There you go. Thanks for being all night.
Plugging e-trons.
Try to fish, but no. All right. So e-tron, they did lower the price, and I think you get in the high 60s now for e-tron crossover. 55?
We talking SUV?
Yeah. So what I have, which ours was like not bad. It's prestige and it was pretty loaded. But here's the thing: at auction, it was so retail. I mean, you get on the new cars, you get the rebates, and for us, that was like I think about $9,000 between federal and state.
Yeah.
And
okay.
So and otherwise an e-tron new is like 85, like a loaded out, every option checks.
Yeah.
At least 2019 when we bought ours, that's what a loaded e-tron would have cost. That same loaded e-tron today as like on the wholesale market is like $55,000. And like, I don't know what they're sitting for retail, like certified pre-owned at dealers, but if I were like a 1-year-old e-tron CPO is a smoking deal. Like right now it is.
Yeah.
I think it's a hell of a lot of car for, while I don't like having, since I bought my new, I don't like particularly taking that depreciation hit. If I still hadn't bought one yet, I think I would be trying to pick a used one up, especially like find one of the cool, like launch edition, like the Daytona gray with the yellow brakes, everything else.
Yeah.
Like it was a cool looking car.
Yep.
But I don't know. So there's my e-tron plug. Buy a used one. Oh. If you can't afford it,
that'll be dinner conversation.
The other side of this was because my daughter just did an e-tron. She did tell me only my daughter, right? She did a story for the school newspaper that was like comparing gas to electric, and it was it was comparing. Basically, I had her compare the Q8 to the e-tron, right? Because they're similarly priced all the way across.
Yeah.
Right. And so what I found out in kind of going through this with her was one, operational costs are way lower, like fuel, and not even counting for like oil changes and services. It's way lower to operate the e-tron than it is the Q8. But on top of that, like the Q8, it just so happens the Q8, the e-tron, and the RS5 are all priced about the same. And after like a year or two, I looked at like the residuals of like, I think the Q8 came out the same year, the e-tron 2019, they all come out the same year, right? So I looked at residual values, and these are like legit Manheim wholesale numbers. So like what they transact for at auction. And the Q8 was softer. It was the softest of the three, and the e-tron held its value roughly akin to RS5. RS5 was a little better, but the e-tron held its value better than the Q8 did. So, who knew? And that's not even counting the rebate, which you won't get if you buy a used one. You got to buy a new one to get the rebate.
Yeah. But I'm sure the first year costs outweigh that gap anyway. You're still better off CPO.
Oh, yeah, for sure.
From a dollar perspective.
The extended warranty, and, I don't know how that affects, because I know they already have a pretty long warranty on the batteries already. But I don't know how CPO affects that. I'm not really sure any of that. By the way, we keep throwing out CPO like everybody knows what it means. Certified pre-owned. That's when an Audi dealer sells one that's got an extended warranty. It's like the new car warranty, but it lasts like 6 years, 100,000 miles. So that's when you go get a certified car at an Audi dealer, a certified Audi and an Audi dealer, that's what a CPO is.
Right.
Anyway, that's it.
That's it.
Yeah, I liked your yeah, and scene. Like, I liked your column, dude, and I think we do regularly get comments about your column. Like, people enjoy it quite a bit.
Good.
So thanks for all you're doing back there in that last page of the book. I always kind of envision that spot as sort of like, do you remember in the old days, like Automobile, and like Jamie Kitman would be back there?
Yeah,
that's kind of, I like that you're kind of serving that purpose back there, and you're very good at it. So thanks for all you're doing.
No, I enjoy it. I like being back there. And anyone has any topics? I mean, this stuff like this is my wheelhouse. I love, and we have plenty of great content and contributions about, you want to know about whatever bespoke Chewbacca colored R8 is out there. We have all that stuff in the magazine. And I read through it myself and enjoy it, but I like to capture, kind of the other end of being an automotive enthusiast or Audi enthusiast, and without people kind of a boring thing. So anything to do with this kind of left of center stuff, I love. So anybody has any ideas, something they think needs to be explored, I'm happy to go exploring for you. Do a lot of George will tell you, even though I'm writing a editorial piece, I provide them with links and research data. So I take it pretty seriously, even if it's just my own opinion. It's try to back it up with science.
Yeah. We don't typically have room for all that, so it doesn't always make the books. Typically, we run it on the website. We will, but I would say unless you probably don't want to give out your personal email. If you don't, I understand. You can always send it to admin if you have any ideas for Aaron for future columns, admin@audiclubna.org, and that comes into the main office, and we can just forward it to him.
Yeah.
So I mean, you're welcome to share your private one too, but I'm not here to push you to put your private one out there. So every hacker whoever listens to this this podcast, I'll email you.
It's rear spoiler at audiclub.org.
Do we have one set up for you?
You will now, because I just spent it.
I guess I'll just have to. Thanks, Aaron. It's, by the way, it's audiclubna.org. If you did audiclub.org, go to some other organization. Just in case you see it to admin at, because the chances of me getting that set up a ton.
I know.
We should do this more often. I'm trying to do more podcasts anyway, and Zoom makes it easier. So
I listened to your that guy, the Porsche selling Porsches. That was great. I started following him and look at, it's pretty interesting stuff.
His stuff's great. Wait till you see what's in the magazine. The cover is really fantastic. It looks like a page out of a sketchbook. And it's a little preview there. And Ivan Shmatov is his name. Buy Porsche to sell Porsche. Google it. It's like underscores in between all the words.
Right.
On Instagram, and he's a designer at Audi in Ingolstadt, and he's a really interesting guy. 32 years old. Putting his stuff on Instagram. He's very not the traditional sort of executive, at 32. He's not a senior designer, but he's doing really cool stuff. And we'll touch on him in the next magazine. We just ran that one. I'm going to try and get this one published too. So we go to print, I believe, Monday, which is tomorrow. So I'm going to try and get the recording version of this onto the podcast. Well, the video will probably get on YouTube if it recorded correctly.
Yeah.
But hopefully so, with all the work you did with your visuals. But yeah, so we'll get this on there, and hopefully this will also be linked in the magazine as well. And for anybody who happens to be reading the magazine and found this, if you look in the Ivan Shmatov feature, there's also a link there to his podcast as well. So,
yeah, really good stuff.
Yeah, so we're trying to do more. So maybe as we come out with new issues, maybe you and I'll chat about other ways you're getting me in trouble with Audi by running your column.
Yeah, or maybe we'll get us out of trouble.
Yeah, or you'll be telling me about the long-term e-tron GT they sent your way. RS e-tron GT, no less. So, you can let me know how that goes if they send you a free car.
I will. But I won't write and drive.
No, only we're not there yet, no matter how much Tesla people want to tell you we are.
Yeah, and I'd prefer I'd prefer to drive actually. I'll let the AI do it on the commute, but I'd like to enjoy the RS e-tron GT. I said it right.
Yeah.
All right, well, good deal, sir.
Yeah, man. That's the news, folks, and we're out of here. Remember,
You need your exit drop music or engine
right.
noise or
We
electric. We should use the e-tron GT noise
as the intro, because we have in the beginning of typically in the podcast we have that early the 5-cylinder driving away thing.
Yep. Yeah, you should do the e-tron. I do like the e-tron GT sound.
Yeah.
Like their motion sound. The backup and forward coasting, don't hit people ones are fine, but I really like their, they actually put research into that. They had audio scientists actually trying to develop that electric-y engine, V10 kind of electric-y sound, and I think it comes off really well. It sounds cool.
It is a cool sound. I will say, I love it, but at the same time, I'm waiting for somebody to do two things. Having had it like ours, one, allow you to turn up the volume if you want a little more presence, right?
Yeah.
And two is allow you to try different stuff, right? Throw a 5-cylinder engine note on there. Why not, right?
Right.
You allow me to go into like Audi Drive Select. How about like Audi Engine Tone Select or Engine Note or whatever we want to call it.
Well, you can turn this. You can adjust the sound vector in other models. It's really no different, right? It's just that cone thing that pushes more noise through the cabin.
Audi Tone Select, Audi Sound Select. I'm just trying to come up names so we don't have to kick it over to the marketing people and they'll come on and say.
It would be be the ET Sound Select PSQ.
Banging Olufsen Bose. right. Sound Plus GT.
Oh well.
All right, man. Well, I thank you for all your time this afternoon.
Yeah, no, it was cool. And
hopefully people enjoy an hour and a half of us complaining.
You can trim it. You can trim some things probably.